The Resolute hummed with the quiet intensity of a ship that had seen its fair share of action. Captain Orion Vale lounged in the command chair, boots kicked up on a console, much to the chagrin of the ship's AI, a prim and precise program named HALE. Captain Vale, HALE's synthesized voice chimed, "For the 5th time, please remove your boots from the sensor array. It is highly unprofessional." Vale smirked, crossing his ankles for good measure. "Relax, Hal. If the galaxy's fate hinges on the angle of my boots, we're in more trouble than I thought." Before Halley could deliver a pointed retort, the ship's main screen blinked to life. Admiral Langston's stern visage filled the display, his immaculate uniform as rigid as his demeanor. Vale straightened, boots landing on the deck with a resounding thunk. "Captain Vale," the Admiral began, his tone clipped, "I assume you've read the briefing for your next mission." "Of course," Vale lied, offering a winning grin. Langston sighed the sigh of a man who had long since resigned himself to the antics of a soldier who got results, if not exactly by the book. "You're being sent to Arathis, the Thraxan homeworld. As you're aware, the Thraxans have been our allies in theory, but their cooperation has been minimal at best. You're to represent humanity in an important diplomatic gesture. Don't screw it up." "Arathis? The place with the glowy trees and the 10-foot-tall aliens who can crush a tank with one hand? Sounds like a vacation spot." Langston's glare could have melted steel. "This is a delicate operation. You'll be meeting Queen Tziroth herself. Show some respect." "Respect. Got it," Vale said, saluting lazily. "No tank jokes, maybe just a light quip about their decor?" The screen went dark, leaving Vale to his own devices. He leaned back in the chair, hands behind his head. "Well, Hal, looks like we're off to meet royalty. Think they'll roll out the red carpet, or is that more of a don't touch anything, or you'll offend someone situation?" "I would advise against making assumptions about Thraxan customs, Captain," Halley replied, the disapproval evident even in its robotic tone. Vale shrugged. "What's the worst that could happen?" Arathis was nothing short of breathtaking. The ship descended through an atmosphere alive with shifting hues of purple and gold, like a living aurora. Below, crystalline spires rose from an alien landscape that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Rivers of liquid luminescence snaked through the terrain, reflecting the vibrant sky. "Wow," Vale muttered as he gazed out the viewport. "It's like someone let an artist loose with too many neon markers." "Captain," Halley interrupted, "I remind you to maintain a respectful demeanor. The Thraxans value decorum." "Noted," Vale said, pulling at the collar of his dress uniform. "You think they'll notice if I skip a button? This thing is choking me." As the Resolute landed on a sleek, metallic platform, a delegation of Thraxan warriors awaited them. Towering figures with shimmering, chitinous armor, the Thraxans radiated an aura of otherworldly majesty. Each movement they made seemed deliberate, as if they carried the weight of centuries in every step. Vale adjusted his uniform and stepped onto the platform, immediately noticing the Thraxan guards' sharp, glowing weapons and their even sharper glares. One of the warriors, a particularly imposing figure with crimson accents on his armor, stepped forward. "You are the human envoy?" "That's me," Vale said, flashing a grin. "Captain Orion Vale, at your service. Nice weapons, by the way. Do they come in pocket size?" The warrior's mandibles clicked in what Vale hoped was amusement. "You will follow," the Thraxan said, turning sharply. "Friendly bunch," Vale muttered under his breath as he followed. The Queen's throne room was a sight to behold. A vast chamber carved from crystalline formations, it seemed to pulse with a living energy. The walls shimmered with ever-changing patterns, and the air was filled with a low hum that resonated in Vale's chest. At the center of it all sat Queen Tziroth. Her bioluminescent form glowed softly, casting ethereal light across the room. She was both regal and imposing, her tall frame adorned with intricate armor that seemed more ceremonial than functional. Her crown, a complex weave of glowing filaments, gave her an almost celestial appearance. Vale approached, acutely aware of the silence that had fallen. The Thraxan delegation knelt, heads bowed in reverence. Vale, however, remained standing, too busy marveling at the throne room's grandeur. One of the guards hissed, "Bow before the Queen!" "Right, bowing," Vale said, attempting a clumsy imitation of the Thraxan gesture. "You'll have to excuse me. We humans usually save this for karaoke nights." A ripple of tension filled the air, and Vale felt every eye in the room on him. Queen Tzirath raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. Her voice, a harmonious blend of tones, echoed through the chamber. "You are the human they sent?" "Yes, ma'am," Vale replied. "Or should I call you Your Majesty? Queen? Supreme ruler of the really impressive throne room?" To his surprise, the Queen's mandibles twitched in what might have been amusement. "You are different." "I get that a lot," Vale said with a grin. Tzirath extended her hand, a gesture that froze everyone in the room. It was a simple act, yet no Thraxan dared to approach. Vale, oblivious to the cultural significance, stepped forward and clasped her hand firmly. "Nice to meet you." The collective gasp that followed could have sucked the air out of the room. The Queen's eyes narrowed, studying him intently. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she spoke. "You are bold. Perhaps too bold." Vale shrugged. "Bold's better than boring, right?" The Queen's lips curled into a faint, enigmatic smile. "We shall see." Captain Orion Vale found himself in a situation he hadn't quite prepared for. Sure, he'd expected some alien grandeur, maybe a tense exchange or two, but standing in a room where the atmosphere practically crackled with shock. That was new, even for him. The Queen's hand, cool to the touch and faintly glowing, was still clasped in his. The room remained silent except for the faint hum of crystalline walls. Slowly, Vale released her hand, taking a half-step back with a sheepish smile. "Well," he said, breaking the silence, "I guess that's not how you do a handshake around here, huh?" The Queen tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "You presume much, human." Vale opened his mouth to respond, but was cut off by a sharp hiss from one of the guards. The sound was somewhere between a snake's warning and the grind of metal on metal. "You dare?" the guard began, stepping forward, but Queen Tzirath silenced him with a raised hand. "He dares," she said, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. "And yet here I stand, unharmed." Vale let out a nervous chuckle. "See? Harmless as a kitten. A very resourceful kitten, but still." Tzirath's mandibles twitched, a subtle motion that Vale guessed was the Thraxan equivalent of a smirk. "You intrigue me," she said. "Tell me, Captain Vale, is boldness a trait of all humans, or are you an anomaly?" "Bit of both," Vale replied, relaxing slightly. "Humans can be bold, but I like to think I've perfected it. Call it a hobby." The Queen turned, gesturing for Vale to follow. Her entourage fell into step behind them, their movements synchronized and precise. Vale hesitated for a moment, glancing at the imposing guards before catching up to her side. "Where are we headed?" he asked, keeping his tone light. "To determine whether your boldness is bravery or foolishness," Tzirath replied without looking at him. "Great," Vale muttered under his breath. "A pop quiz on my first day." The corridor they entered seemed to stretch endlessly, its crystalline walls glowing faintly with each step. Vale marveled at the architecture. It was as if the entire palace was alive, pulsating with energy. "Nice place you've got here," he said. "Bit shiny for my taste, but I hear bioluminescence is all the rage." The Queen glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Do all humans speak so incessantly?" "Just the charming ones," Vale replied, flashing a grin. Tzirath stopped abruptly, causing Vale to nearly bump into her. She turned to face him, her towering frame casting a shadow over him. "You stand before the Queen of the Thraxan," she said, her voice low but commanding. "Your irreverence is unusual. Do you not fear me?" Vale considered the question carefully, his grin fading slightly. "Fear? Sure, a little. You're, very tall for one thing, and those guards of yours? Definitely intimidating. Yet you speak as if we are equals, she said, studying him closely. That's just how we humans roll, Vale replied. Besides, fear doesn't mean silence. Sometimes it just means trying to get the other guy to laugh before they decide to crush you. To his surprise, the queen tilted her head again, the faintest glimmer of amusement in her eyes. Fascinating. They arrived at a large chamber that resembled an arena. The crystalline walls were lined with rows of Thraxan warriors, their glowing armor reflecting the light of an enormous pulsating orb suspended in the center of the room. Vale whistled low. Wow, that's, quite the centerpiece. What is it? A disco ball on steroids? The core of convergence, Tzirath said, her tone reverent. It is the heart of our unity. It amplifies our collective strength. Cool, Vale said, nodding. Also, slightly ominous. The queen gestured to the orb, and the room fell silent. This is a place where leaders are tested, Captain Vale. You will face a trial. Trial? Vale repeated, raising an eyebrow. I didn't bring my running shoes, so if it's an obstacle course, we might have a problem. Tzirath ignored his comment and continued. You will demonstrate your worthiness as my commander. Step forward. The crowd parted as Vale hesitated, glancing at the queen. What happens if I fail? Then you will no longer be my commander, she said simply. Vale swallowed. Right. No pressure. As he stepped into the center of the arena, the orb flared, casting an intense light across the room. From the edges of the chamber, several Thraxan warriors emerged, their weapons humming with energy. Oh, great, Vale muttered. Combat trial. My favorite. The first warrior lunged at him, and Vale barely dodged, rolling to the side. Hey, can we talk about this? Maybe grab a drink, discuss our feelings? The crowd murmured as Vale scrambled to his feet, narrowly avoiding another attack. He spotted a discarded staff nearby and grabbed it, spinning it awkwardly in his hands. Okay, let's see if this thing has a stun setting, he quipped, brandishing the staff. To his surprise, the queen called out, Enough! The warriors halted immediately, and Vale exhaled in relief. You are resourceful, Tzirath said, stepping forward. Untrained, undisciplined, but resourceful. I prefer creative problem solver, Vale said, leaning on the staff. The queen approached, her gaze intense. You have passed the first test, Captain Vale, but there is much yet to prove. Fantastic, Vale said, grinning despite the sweat on his brow. So do I get a badge or something? The queen's lips twitched in what Vale suspected might be the Thraxan version of a smile. You get to live another day. Well, Vale said, handing the staff to a nearby guard. I'll take it. As the crowd began to disperse, Tzirath leaned closer to Vale, her voice low. You continue to surprise me, Captain. Stick around, Vale replied. I'm full of surprises. Tzirath straightened, her expression inscrutable. Indeed. The next morning, or what Vale assumed was morning, given the perpetual glow of Orathis, he found himself in a chamber that could only be described as excessively regal. The walls shimmered with flowing patterns, and the air smelled faintly of something floral, but entirely alien. The bed, though spacious and lavishly adorned, felt like it was watching him. Hal, Vale muttered to the small communicator on his wrist, did you scan this thing for sentience? Hal's voice crackled to life. The bedding is not alive, Captain. However, I must note that it is composed of Thraxan biofibers capable of self-repair. Great, Vale said, sitting up. If I snore, it'll probably fix the wrinkles before I wake up. He stretched, glancing at his uniform, freshly cleaned and pressed, though he had no idea how or when it had happened. So what's the agenda for today? More dazzling displays of alien architecture? Maybe a light brunch with the Queen? Hallie hesitated. Captain, I must remind you that your actions have already deviated significantly from established diplomatic protocols. Vale grinned, pulling on his boots. Yeah, but they've been effective. I think I'm growing on her. He found Queen Tizerath in a vast chamber that seemed to double as a command center. Holographic projections floated midair, displaying what Vale assumed were Thraxan fleet movements, territorial maps, or possibly an elaborate game of alien chess. The Queen stood at the center, flanked by advisors who radiated disapproval at Vale's approach. He gave them a casual wave, which only deepened their scowls. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Vale said, stopping just short of what he hoped was a respectful distance. "Or is it afternoon? Hard to tell with all the glowy ambiance." Tizerath turned to him, her expression unreadable as always. "Captain Vale, you slept well, I trust?" "Like a rock," he replied. "Well, a rock that snores. Your biofiber bed might need therapy after last night." One of the advisors hissed, a low guttural sound that echoed through the chamber. "You dare address the Queen with such irreverence?" Vale held up his hands. "Hey, I'm just trying to lighten the mood. Diplomatic icebreaker, you know." Tizerath raised a hand, silencing the advisor. "Enough. The humans' ways may be strange, but they are not without merit." Vale shot the advisor a smug grin before turning back to the Queen. "So, what's on the agenda? Another trial? Hopefully less dodge the pointy sticks this time." The Queen's mandibles twitched. "There will be no trial today. Instead, you will accompany me on a journey." "A journey?" Vale repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Sounds intriguing. Do I need to pack snacks?" "Snacks will not be necessary," she said, already turning toward the exit. "Follow me." The transport vessel they boarded was sleek, its design both functional and elegant. Vale found himself seated across from the Queen in a cabin that was surprisingly sparse, considering her royal status. "So," he said, leaning back in his seat, "where are we headed? A secret Thraxan hideout, the galaxy's best coffee shop." Tizerath tilted her head, studying him. "You speak of trivial matters with such ease. Do you not feel the weight of your position?" Vale shrugged. "It's my coping mechanism. You try being a human in a room full of towering aliens with glowing weapons and see how you handle it." The Queen's mandibles twitched again, a gesture Vale was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Perhaps you are more adaptable than I thought." "High praise," Vale said with a grin. "But seriously, where are we going?" "To the Nexus of Ancients," she replied. "That sounds ominous," Vale said. "What's the Nexus of Ancients? Some kind of sacred site? A fancy museum?" "It is the heart of our history," Tizerath said, her tone reverent, "and the source of our greatest strength." Vale frowned. "You're not about to sacrifice me to some glowing orb, are you? Because I've seen how that ends, and it's never good for the guy in my position." Tizerath's lips curved slightly. "Your humor is relentless, Captain." "Glad you're catching on," Vale said. The Nexus of Ancients was a sprawling structure carved into the side of a crystalline mountain. Its entrance was flanked by massive statues of Thraxan warriors, their glowing eyes casting an eerie light over the path. Vale followed Tizerath into the structure, his curiosity outweighing his trepidation. The interior was vast, its walls inscribed with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer as he walked. "This place is incredible," he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "It's like a combination of a cathedral and a light show." Tizerath glanced at him. "It is a place of great significance to my people. Few are permitted to enter. And yet, here I am," Vale said, glancing around. "Guess I'm special." "You are unusual," she said, her tone contemplative. "I'll take that as a compliment," Vale replied. They reached the center of the Nexus, where a massive crystalline structure pulsed with a rhythmic light. Tizerath approached it, her movements deliberate. "This is the core of memory," she said. "It holds the collective knowledge of our people, stretching back millennia." Vale raised an eyebrow. "Impressive. So, what happens now? Do I stick my hand in it and hope for the best?" Tazirath turned to him, her expression serious. You will touch it, yes, but be warned. Many have tried and failed to commune with the core. Failed how? Vale asked, eyeing the glowing structure warily. They were unworthy, she said, her voice heavy with meaning. Right, Vale said, taking a deep breath. No pressure then. He stepped forward, placing his hand on the surface of the core. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, and his vision exploded with light. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the Nexus. He stood in a vast, empty expanse, the ground beneath him shimmering like liquid glass. Welcome, human, a voice said, echoing from all directions. Vale turned, finding himself face to face with a towering figure that resembled the Queen, but was far more imposing. Its body seemed to be made of pure light, its eyes burning with intensity. Hi, Vale said, raising a hand in a tentative wave. Nice place you've got here. You are bold to stand before me, the figure said. Boldness is kind of my thing, Vale replied. The figure studied him for a long moment. We shall see if it is enough. Before Vale could respond, the world around him shifted, and he found himself back in the Nexus, gasping for breath. Tazirath stood over him, her expression unreadable. You survived, she said. Yeah, Vale said, struggling to his feet. That was something else. You continue to surprise me, Captain, Tazirath said softly. Vale grinned weakly. Stick around. I'm just getting started. Captain Orion Vale's head still buzzed from his encounter with the core of memory, like the aftermath of an intense conversation with someone who thought far too highly of themselves. The memory of that towering figure, equal parts awe-inspiring and mildly terrifying, was fresh in his mind. I feel like I just took a galactic pop quiz with zero prep, Vale muttered, rubbing his temples. And the grading system, definitely biased. You spoke with the Echo, Queen Tazirath said, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. The Echo? Vale asked, turning toward her. The essence of our ancestors, Tazirath explained, her mandibles twitching slightly. It judges those who dare to commune with the core. Few survive the encounter unscathed. Well, I'm glad I made it out in one piece, Vale said, stretching his arms. Although if the Echo wanted to give me a souvenir, like a keychain or a coffee mug, I wouldn't have complained. Tazirath's expression shifted, the faintest hint of amusement flickering in her glowing eyes. You find humor in all things, it seems. Helps me cope, Vale said with a shrug, especially when ancient glowing entities start judging me. And the two walked side by side through the crystalline corridors of the Nexus, their footsteps echoing softly. The walls pulsed faintly, as if responding to their presence. Tell me, Captain, Tazirath began, her tone contemplative. What did the Echo say to you? Vale hesitated, his hand brushing against the cool, shimmering surface of the wall. It wasn't exactly a heart-to-heart, more like a cryptic warning. Explain, Tazirath urged, her gaze piercing. It said something about boldness and choices, Vale replied, his brow furrowing. That my actions could shape the fate of more than just myself. Typical prophecy stuff, you know? Vague enough to make you paranoid, but not helpful enough to give you a game plan. The Queen stopped, turning to face him fully. The Echo rarely speaks in such terms. It has seen something in you, Captain Vale. Something that may alter the course of our people. Vale chuckled nervously. No pressure, right? Tazirath stepped closer, her towering frame casting a shadow over him. Do not mistake humor for understanding. What lies ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Vale met her gaze, his smile fading slightly. I get it. High stakes, no do-overs. But if it's all the same to you, I'm going to keep cracking jokes. It's how I stay sane. Very well, Tazirath said, her mandibles twitching again. Your irreverence may yet prove useful. Their journey back to the palace was uneventful, save for the occasional question from Vale about the Nexus. So, do you guys ever throw parties in there? He asked, gesturing vaguely toward the crystalline mountain as it faded into the distance. Seems like a killer venue for a dance-off. The Nexus is a sacred site, Tizeroth said, her tone firm but not unkind. Got it, Vale said. No conga lines in the sanctum. The transport glided smoothly into the palace's hangar, its engines humming softly before powering down. As they disembarked, a Thraxan advisor approached, his expression as severe as ever. Your Majesty, the advisor said, bowing deeply. A delegation from the Nyx Coalition awaits your audience. Tizeroth nodded. Inform them I will attend shortly. Nyx Coalition? Vale asked as they ascended the grand staircase leading to the throne room. Friends of yours? Hardly, Tizeroth replied. The Coalition is a tenuous alliance of systems vying for dominance in the outer sectors. Their interests often conflict with our own. Vale smirked. Sounds like a fun group. What do they want? To renegotiate trade routes, Tizeroth said, her tone laced with disdain. Their demands grow bolder with each meeting. Let me guess, Vale said. They want the Thraxans to play nice while they scoop up all the good stuff? Precisely, Tizeroth said. Your insight is unexpected. Hey, politics is the same everywhere, Vale said. You've got the big kids, the wannabe big kids, and the ones who just want to sneak extra dessert when no one's looking. The throne room was abuzz with activity as the delegation from the Nyx Coalition arrived. Vale leaned casually against a pillar, watching the proceedings with interest. The leader of the delegation, a wiry being with a translucent, shifting form, stepped forward. Its voice was melodic, yet sharp, like glass chimes in a storm. Queen Tizeroth, we greet you with respect and offer terms that will benefit both our peoples. And yet your terms always seem to favor your coalition, Tizeroth replied, her tone icy. Vale stifled a yawn, muttering under his breath. Diplomatic sparring, now with 20% more passive aggression. One of the Thraxan guards shot him a warning glare, but Vale merely grinned. The negotiations dragged on, with the coalition representative presenting increasingly convoluted arguments. Vale, growing bored, leaned toward Tizeroth and whispered, Want me to liven things up? I could start juggling or something. The Queen's mandibles twitched. Your patience is lacking, Captain. Patience is overrated, Vale replied. As the delegation finally departed, Tizeroth turned to Vale. Your commentary, while disruptive, was not entirely unwelcome. Glad I could help, Vale said, stretching. So what's next? Saving the galaxy? Winning an intergalactic karaoke contest? Tizeroth regarded him for a moment, her expression inscrutable. There is much yet to be done, Captain. And I suspect you will play a larger role than even you realize. Story of my life, Vale said with a smirk. The Queen's lips curved slightly. Then let us see where your story takes us. As they exited the throne room, Vale couldn't shake the feeling that his journey with the Thraxans was only just beginning, and that the universe had a few surprises left in store. The palace buzzed with an undercurrent of tension the next morning. Even Vale, who usually relied on sarcasm to diffuse awkward situations, couldn't ignore the shift. He wandered into the expansive dining hall, where an assortment of foods, most of which looked like they might sprout legs and walk away, awaited. Hallie's voice crackled in his earpiece. Captain, I advise caution. Thraxan cuisine is known to contain biochemical agents that could react unpredictably with human physiology. Vale grabbed a plate of something neon green that shimmered faintly. Unpredictable, huh? That's basically my motto. Besides, you can't judge a meal by its glow. He had just taken a cautious bite, a mix of sweet, tangy, and something vaguely reminiscent of batteries, when Tizeroth entered. Captain Vale, she said, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of the room. He swallowed hurriedly and stood, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Your Majesty, fancy seeing you in the land of sentient pastries. Tizeroth tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. You are peculiar. Flattery will get you everywhere, he quipped, gesturing toward the buffet. Care for a plate of bioluminescent delight? She ignored his attempt at levity and gestured for him to follow. There is a matter that requires your attention. The Queen led him to what could only be described as a war room, though it bore little resemblance to the tactical spaces Vale was used to. Holographic projections of star systems floated in the air, their ethereal light casting intricate patterns on the polished floor. Tizeroth approached a glowing console, flanked by two of her advisors. Both regarded Vale with expressions that suggested they'd rather see him jettisoned into space. Before you stands Commander Xylar, Tizeroth said, indicating one of the advisors. Xylar's exoskeleton gleamed under the soft light, his posture rigid and intimidating. Ah, Vale said, nodding toward Xylar. Nice to meet you, Commander. Love what you've done with the place. Real Galactic menace vibes. Xylar's mandibles clicked sharply. This human lacks the discipline required for his position, Your Majesty. Vale raised a hand. I'm standing right here, buddy. Tizeroth silenced Xylar with a glance. Captain Vale has earned his place among us, despite his unconventional methods. Unconventional is one word for it, Xylar muttered. Vale grinned. Hey, if you want to swap notes on unconventional methods, I'm all ears. Well, mostly ears. Xylar's glare could have melted titanium, but Tizeroth stepped in. Enough, both of you. She turned to the hologram, which now displayed a cluster of star systems marked with ominous red symbols. The Nyx coalition grows bolder by the day. They've begun encroaching on our borders, testing our defenses. Testing, huh? Vale said, leaning closer to the projection. Let me guess. They poke at you until you either give in or poke back harder. Tizeroth's mandibles twitched in what Vale hoped was agreement. Precisely. Their latest provocation occurred near the Rylos Nebula. A Thraxan outpost was attacked, its defenses overwhelmed. Vale whistled low. That's not just poking, that's a full-on shove. It is a declaration, Xylar said, his tone grim. Sounds like someone needs to send them a strongly worded message, Vale said, preferably one that involves explosions. Tizeroth regarded him thoughtfully. You suggest a show of force? Well, yeah, Vale said, but not just brute strength. You've got to outsmart them. Hit them where it hurts, but make it look like they're the bad guys. Xylar scoffed. And what does this human know of strategy? Vale grinned. Plenty. For starters, you don't play by the other guy's rules. You make your own. The discussion eventually gave way to action, with Vale tagging along as the Thraxan fleet mobilized. He found himself aboard one of their warships, an impressive vessel bristling with advanced weaponry. This is the Girilith, Tizeroth said as they entered the command deck. It will serve as our flagship. Vale nodded appreciatively. Nice ride. Does it come with a minibar? The crew stared at him blankly, and he sighed. Tough crowd. As the fleet approached the Rylos Nebula, tension mounted. Vale, ever the opportunist, decided to lighten the mood. So, he said, addressing the nearest Thraxan officer, do you guys name your ships after terrifying things on purpose, or is that just a happy coincidence? The officer blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. It is tradition, Tizeroth said, her tone neutral. Tradition, huh? Vale said. Back home, we name our ships after people, like the USS Michael Jordan, great athlete. Probably wouldn't win a space battle, though. The fleet encountered the Coalition forces near the nebula's edge. The Coalition ships were sleek and agile, darting through the nebula's swirling gas like predators. Vale watched the battle unfold from the command deck, marveling at the precision of the Thraxan pilots. Impressive, he said, leaning against a console. You guys don't mess around. Victory is not yet assured, Xylar said, his tone clipped. Vale smirked. Relax, Commander. I've got a good feeling about this. As the Thraxan fleet pressed their advantage, A coalition ship broke formation, attempting to flank the Zerolith. "Looks like we've got company," Vale said, pointing at the holographic display. Tzeroth issued a command in her native tongue, and the Zerolith's weapons roared to life. The coalition ship disintegrated in a blaze of light. "Nice shot," Vale said, grinning. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." By the end of the engagement, the coalition forces had retreated, leaving the Thraxans victorious. As the fleet regrouped, Vale turned to Tzeroth. "Well, that was fun. Let's do it again sometime." Tzeroth regarded him with an inscrutable expression. "You are an enigma, Captain Vale, but your instincts serve you well." He grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." The Queen's mandibles twitched. "Perhaps it is." As the ship began its journey back to Arathis, Vale couldn't help but wonder what other challenges lay ahead, and whether his unique brand of humor would continue to be an asset in the face of an ever-unfolding cosmic drama. The Zerolith sailed through the shimmering veil of the Rylos Nebula, leaving behind the site of their recent skirmish. Victory was theirs, but the weight of what lay ahead loomed large. As Captain Orion Vale lounged in the observation deck, gazing at the swirling gas clouds outside, he couldn't help but feel like the universe had more in store for him, likely of the messy and dangerous variety. Halley's voice chimed in his earpiece. "Captain, your vital signs indicate elevated stress levels. May I suggest a calming activity, such as deep breathing or yoga?" "Halley, I'm not stressed," Vale replied, sipping something that passed for tea in Thraxan culture. It tasted vaguely like licorice mixed with battery acid. "I'm contemplating." "You are staring into a nebula while consuming an unregulated beverage," Halley said. "Shall I initiate a toxicology scan?" Vale chuckled. "Relax, buddy. If this tea kills me, at least I'll go out with glowing guts." His musings were interrupted by the soft hum of the door sliding open. Queen Tzeroth entered, her presence commanding as always. She carried herself with an air of regal composure, though Vale had come to recognize the subtle cues in her body language. This time, she seemed unusually pensive. "Captain Vale," she said, approaching him. He straightened up, setting his cup aside. "Your Majesty, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Tzeroth gestured for him to remain seated and took a seat opposite him, her glowing eyes fixed on the nebula outside. "We must speak candidly." "That's my specialty," Vale said with a grin. "What's on your mind?" The Queen hesitated for a moment, an uncharacteristic pause that caught Vale's attention. "Our recent victory has emboldened my people, but it has also drawn the attention of powerful adversaries. The coalition will not rest after their defeat." "No surprise there," Vale said. "Bullies tend to double down when they're embarrassed." Tzeroth's mandibles twitched in agreement. "Our actions have set events in motion that cannot be undone. The fate of the Thraxan people, and perhaps the galaxy, now hangs in the balance." Vale leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us. But hey, no pressure, right?" The conversation shifted to strategy as Tzeroth outlined her plan. The coalition's next move, she believed, would target Arathis itself. A direct assault on the Thraxan homeworld was unthinkable, but desperation often bred recklessness. Vale studied the holographic map she projected, his eyes narrowing. "If they're coming for Arathis, they'll need to pass through these choke points," he said, pointing to two narrow passages in the star charts. "That's where we hit them." Tzeroth nodded. "Your instincts are sharp, Captain, but we must also account for their likely use of cloaking technology. The Coalition's ships are capable of eluding even our most advanced sensors." "Cloaking, huh?" Vale said, rubbing his chin. "Well, nothing's invisible forever. Maybe we can lure them into revealing themselves." "And how do you propose we accomplish that?" Tzeroth asked. Vale grinned. "By giving them exactly what they're looking for, a big shiny target." As preparations for the trap began, Vale found himself working closely with Xylar. The two were an unlikely duo, their interactions often punctuated by bickering and snide remarks. "Your plan is reckless," Xylar said as they reviewed the deployment of decoy ships. "Reckless or brilliant?" Vale countered. "Fine line, I know." "It is an unnecessary risk," Xylar insisted, his mandibles clicking irritably. "And yet here you are helping me execute it," Vale said with a smirk. "Admit it, Xylar. You're starting to like me." Xylar's glare could have cut through a hull. "Do not flatter yourself, human." Vale shrugged. "Suit yourself, but when this works, you'll owe me a drink." The trap was set near a binary star system, its intense radiation providing natural interference to sensors, a perfect spot to bait the Coalition. Vale oversaw the operation from a Thraxan cruiser, his eyes glued to the holographic display. "Decoys are in position," a Thraxan officer reported. "Now we wait," Vale said, leaning back in his chair. "Hope the Coalition likes surprises." Hallie's voice chimed in his earpiece. "Captain, the probability of success for this maneuver is currently estimated at 47.3%. "Those are decent odds," Vale replied. "I've gambled on worse." "Your confidence is statistically anomalous," Hallie remarked. "That's why they pay me the big bucks," Vale said with a grin. When the Coalition ships finally appeared, their cloaking devices flickering as they entered the decoy zone, the tension on the command deck was palpable. "There they are," Vale said, his grin widening. "Right on schedule." Tzirath, standing beside him, issued a series of rapid commands in her native tongue. The Thraxan fleet moved with precision, surrounding the Coalition ships and cutting off their escape routes. The battle that followed was intense but brief. The Coalition, caught off guard, was forced to retreat once again. As the last enemy ship disappeared into hyperspace, Vale let out a low whistle. That was close, but effective. Tzirath regarded him with a mixture of admiration and something else, something Vale couldn't quite place. "Your boldness continues to surprise me, Captain Vale." He shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Boldness is kind of my thing." The Queen's mandibles twitched, and for a moment Vale thought she might actually be smiling. "Perhaps that is why you were chosen." "Chosen for what?" Vale asked, his brow furrowing. Tzirath didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned back to the holographic display, her expression contemplative. "All in good time, Captain," she said finally. Vale groaned. "Great. Another cryptic prophecy. My favorite." As the ship returned to Arathis, Vale couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were only going to get higher. He glanced at Tzirath, who stood silently by the viewport, her gaze fixed on the stars. "Hey," he said, breaking the silence. "Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out. Together." She turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. "Together, indeed." The words hung between them, carrying a weight that neither fully understood yet. But for the first time, Vale felt a strange sense of belonging, a connection to this alien queen and her people that went beyond mere circumstance. The universe, it seemed, had plans for them both. The sprawling cityscape of Arathis glittered like a constellation beneath the twin moons. From the balcony of the royal palace, Captain Orion Vale surveyed the capital with an odd mix of pride and trepidation. The Thraxan people had thrown a victory celebration in his honor, an event that, in his words, was part parade, part alien rave, and entirely too much glowing jelly. As the revelry echoed in the distance, Queen Tzirath joined him, her robes shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that shifted in time with her mood. Tonight, the patterns were calm, serene. "Enjoying the festivities, Captain?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "I'd be lying if I said I didn't love a good party," Vale replied, leaning on the railing. "But I'm not great with the whole being the center of attention thing." "Curious," Tzirath said, tilting her head. "You seem to thrive under scrutiny." Vale chuckled. "Only when it involves space battles and snarky one-liners. Put me in front of a crowd chanting my name, and I suddenly forget how to function. Tziroth's mandibles twitched, a sign Vale had come to recognize as her version of a smile. You are an enigma, Captain Vale. Enigma hero. Guy who won't stop making jokes. Call me whatever you want, Vale said, his grin fading slightly. But I'm still just me. The guy who's winging it half the time. The Queen regarded him for a long moment before speaking. You underestimate yourself, Orion. Your instincts and courage have united two species who once saw each other as adversaries. You have inspired hope where there was none. Vale scratched the back of his neck, suddenly feeling exposed. Well, when you put it that way, I guess I'm kind of awesome. Tziroth's glowing eyes softened. Indeed you are. Before the conversation could grow too heavy, Hallie's voice crackled in his earpiece. Captain, I detect an unusual spike in your cortisol levels. Are you experiencing discomfort? Vale rolled his eyes. Hallie, if you're going to monitor my stress, at least buy me dinner first. As the celebration wound down, Vale found himself pulled into a final council meeting with Tziroth and her advisors. The coalition had been driven back, but their threat lingered on the fringes of Thraxan space. The Queen's Council debated strategy, logistics, and the allocation of resources, but the atmosphere was different now, less contentious, more unified. Even Xylar had softened toward Vale, though his tone remained characteristically sharp. Captain Vale, Xylar said, addressing him directly. Despite my initial doubts, your unconventional methods have proven effective. I commend you. Vale blinked in mock surprise. Did you just say something nice about me? Someone mark the calendar. This is a historic moment. Xylar's mandibles clicked in irritation, but the faintest hint of amusement flickered in his multifaceted eyes. Tziroth intervened before the banter could escalate. The Thraxan people owe you a great debt, Captain, but there is one matter left to resolve. Vale raised an eyebrow. Oh? What's that? The Queen rose from her seat, her presence commanding. You have become more than an ally to us, Orion. You are a symbol of unity, a bridge between our worlds. I believe it is time we formalize this bond. Vale tilted his head. Formalize how? Tziroth stepped closer, her bioluminescent robes casting an ethereal glow. By forging an alliance not only of strategy, but of hearts. Orion Vale, I wish to offer you my hand in marriage. The room fell silent. Vale's jaw dropped slightly, his mind racing. He could feel Hallie's virtual presence buzzing in his earpiece, probably trying to calculate the odds of this scenario. Well, that's not something you hear every day, Vale stammered. I understand this is an unusual proposal, Tziroth said, her tone steady. But it is one I make with sincerity. Together we could guide our people into a new era. Vale rubbed his temples, muttering under his breath. Okay, think, Vale. Intergalactic politics, cultural diplomacy, personal feelings. Yep, this is way above my pay grade. Tziroth waited patiently, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Finally, Vale looked up, his expression a mix of determination and humor. You know, Your Majesty, I came here expecting to fight aliens, not marry them. But you've got a point. We've done some good together. And maybe, just maybe, this crazy idea of yours could work. The Queen's mandibles twitched in what could only be described as relief. Then you accept? Vale grinned. Sure, but on one condition. Tziroth raised an eyebrow. And that is? I get to pick the playlist for the wedding reception. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparations, negotiations, and cultural exchanges. The announcement of the union was met with mixed reactions. Some celebrated it as a bold step forward, while others were wary of the implications. Through it all, Vale remained his irreverent self, using humor to defuse tensions and bridge gaps. He even managed to convince Xylar to participate in a human-style bachelor party, much to the commander's chagrin. The wedding itself was a spectacle unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Held in a vast chamber adorned with Thraxan bioluminescent flora, it combined the traditions of both species in a ceremony that was as bizarre as it was beautiful. As Vale stood beside Tizirath, he couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come, from a cynical soldier with a knack for trouble to a leader, and apparently a royal consort. When the ceremony concluded and the crowd erupted in cheers, Vale leaned toward Tizirath. "Well, Your Majesty, looks like we're stuck with each other." She regarded him with a rare warmth. "I can think of worse fates, Orion." Vale smirked. "Flattery will get you everywhere." As the newly united Thraxan-human alliance prepared to face the challenges ahead, Vale couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure. But for now, he was content to enjoy the moment, surrounded by friends, allies, and the unmistakable glow of a brighter future.